Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Buddy Muffin. Today we have the patch notes from patch 12.21. This is the patch that the World Championships and the regional qualifiers are going to be played on, so it's a pretty important patch. It's also the final serious patch of the set, so let's just get right into it and break it down because there are a lot of surprises in patch 12.22, which we'll be updating in 2 weeks. So what's important about this patch right now is that there's not going to be a B patch. They promised us that, so unless something crazy happens, there's not going to be a B patch. So if you want to really grind out a patch, this is the time to do it because whatever you learn in the first week, it's going to stay with you going into the next one. So starting off into the S tier, there aren't too many changes from the meta snapshot from last week because the patch wasn't that big. However, we did update a section on the pro meta, so we're going to be focusing on what happened in the Korean regional finals and how that applies to the North America one going on this weekend. So starting off in the S tier, we have Graves, Seraphine, Dragons, Olaf Reroll, Jade, Kaisa Reroll, Mirage, Daeja, Karma Reroll, and Yone. And then in the A tier, we have Lagoon, Ezreal, Guild Zippy, Xayah, Darkflight, Mage Nomsy, Whispers, and Built Different. And in the B tier, Dragonmancer, Lee Sin, Astral, Graves, Nilah, and Darkflight Cannoneer. Everything else remains to be seen. I'm actually surprised that there hasn't been any good Zeri or Varus comps so far in this set. But maybe in the last month that we have, people may figure something out. But without further ado, let's get into how to play the comps. So a lot of these we've ran over them in previous meta snapshots. So I'll do a quicker overview of some of these if they aren't new. But if you guys have any questions on any of these compositions, go ahead and check out the Discord down below where we have a lot of people discussing those builds and hopefully some Q&A in the comments as well if you have any questions on how to play the comps. But most of the info is going to be in the guides as you guys are about to see. Before we go on into how to play every single composition, I am actually running a giveaway on Twitter at twitter.com/bunnymuffinslol. I'll leave a link down in the description and in the comments, but we're giving away 500 little legend eggs. There's going to be 50 winners, 10 eggs each, so go on to Twitter and just check that out, and good luck to everyone who participates. So in the Graves Seraphine composition, we have all the items listed out here. I know there are a lot of items, but you really just need to focus on the Morellonomicon and the Zeeks. And then just get 3 at least okay Graves items and you should be good to go. The way to play this comp, and a lot of people are wondering oh, when do I roll for the composition? Again, all that is in the write-outs on the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta. And over here you see you ideally roll on 7 at 4-1 for Seraphine, Zyra, and Zac, and Rakan 2-star, and then maybe 1 Graves and 1 Pantheon. So if you have questions on oh, some comps are good at rolling at 8, some comps are good at rolling at 7, which one do I do, as well as a bunch of different item recommendations, we have that all on the website, so that's why I'm going to go over things a little more quickly this time around because it's towards the end of the set. But onto the next comp, we have the Dragon build. This one, still very, very popular. It's in the late game, there's not much you could do against it. The one thing we did change is that we added 2 pictures this time. So the one down here we see is the regular one. This is with Aoshin, Shyvana, Terra, Idis, and Rakan. And the top one here, we have Terra, Aurelion Sol, Shioyu, and Shyvana, and then Mystics. If you need to tech in Mystics, the top one's the way to go. So this top comp actually counters the one you see down here because you have all the Mystics. So it's a little bit of a weird variation. And the Aurelion Sol seems to be slightly stronger after what happened in the last week. So it's not all Aoshin, despite popular belief. But we go into how to play both these comps. It's pretty much the same thing. You roll down, see what dragons you hit, and then build the comp around that. And you have all the item recommendations somewhere around here. Shyvana wants Morello and AP. Aoshin needs damage and healing and some mana regeneration. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You only go for this comp if you hit these requirements. And the reason why is because you just need a pretty big economy to play this composition. I will note in the augments, I'm still keeping level up and high-end shopping here. These 2 augments are removed right now, but they're bringing them back in the next patch, so I'll leave them in here for now. They'll be back later, so just keep that in mind that you can't get these right now. Onto the next comp, we have Olaf Scalescorn Whispers. This is the best reroll comp right now. It relies on Olaf reroll. And yeah, he just gets a bunch of AD. You kind of sack him early so that he gets stacks. In case you guys didn't know yet, Olaf, every time he dies, he gets bonus attack damage added onto him. And then you just go from there, and he will carry you in a lot of fights. Reroll for him 3-star. All the other units you see here, they don't really matter. You just need to match any synergies you get with him. So if you get a bunch of random upgrades for synergies you don't see on your board here or champions you don't see on the board here, as long as they're somehow benefiting Olaf, you're going to be good. So if you get like 4 warrior. Right now we have 2 warrior on the picture here. If you go for 4, that's perfectly fine. If you go for 4 or 6 Scalescorn, perfectly fine as well. You just need something that really benefits Olaf. Onto the next build, we have the Soy'Fen build. So this one, very similar to the other ones we've seen so far. As you guys can see, the top like 2 or 3 comps right now, they're all wanting swords. So when they're all strong together, it just makes sword starts really, really powerful. And we'll get into items in the later sections. But you really just want to focus on Shioyu and Siphon items. That's stuff like Bloodthirster, Edge of Night, Titan's Resolve is really good on them too. And they just pretty much 2v8 or 2v9, depending on how many people you're facing. You want to roll on level 8 primarily on this comp because you're looking for a lot of 4-cost units. Onto the next build, we have Kaisa Reroll. So yeah, they buffed up Zac a lot, so this comp became a bit viable. And the way to play this, you just reroll at level 6 for 3-star Zac and Kaisa. And you want to just find a time to stabilize. Typically, that's around stage 3-2 before you do the full slow roll. And I have a video on like how to cover slow roll and rerolling if you guys don't know what that is. And I'll leave a card up here for you guys who are interested. Next build we have is Mirage. So I actually did a game and got coached while playing the Mirage comp by the person who made this meta snapshot. He's been like top 10 challenger every set. He's played in a lot of the North American regional finals. And yeah, so if you guys want to get some TFT coaching, go check that out as well. It's on my website, bunnymuffins.lol/TFT-coaching for all your needs there. But the main point of this comp is Daeja is just very, very strong because he transitions into a lot of other carries really effectively. And he's also just pretty solid on his own. The Mirage comp can also be very flexible, so you could play Mirage Cavalier, you could play Mirage Guild, you could also play Guild Xayah because like a lot of the items and synergies kind of overlap with each other. For example, both Daeja and Xayah like Rageblade. So there are a lot of different directions you could go for this composition, so that's part of why it's really, really nice. But ideally, you just item hold with Ezreal in the early game, slowly transition into other things, and keep in mind all the Mirage variants, they're all pretty viable. We do make a note on how to play each and every one of them on the website if you guys want to check that out in your free time. Next build we have up is Karma Reroll. So Karma got nerfed a tiny bit, but it's still pretty strong because it was like a very small nerf, like a micro nerf, if you will. And because of that, it's still pretty playable. So if it did pretty well for you last patch, it's going to do almost just as well now. If not, it might even be better because maybe you're not contested anymore. So a lot of times when something gets nerfed in TFT, it's not the end of the world because if less players are playing it, it actually becomes better. There's a lot of different weird breakpoints. So if you're in some meta where 3 people are playing a composition and the comp's really good, right? That's why 3 people are playing it, but then it gets nerfed and then only 1 person's playing it per game now, and that 1 person is you. Obviously, the comp's still gonna be really strong, but if it goes down to maybe 2.5 players instead, then maybe it's not going to be as good as it was before and the nerf actually worked out. So whenever things are buffed and nerfed, you always have to check on like how often they're played compared to previous patches, which is kind of like a weird dynamic because it changes every single day. It's kind of like the stock market or something like that. You know, it's like some news comes out and then like everyone's buying or selling something based on that news, and then you kind of check the price afterwards and you see like, oh, maybe they overreacted or maybe they underreacted or maybe they reacted an appropriate amount. Kind of same thing in TFT, honestly. So on to the next build, we have Yone Reroll. This one, you just need Swiftshot emblem or scope weapons. And if you don't have that, I wouldn't recommend playing the comp. Some people have been doing it without Swiftshot or scope weapons, but I just don't recommend it. There's so many other good things to go for in this patch that if you ever are in that situation where you get a lot of Yones, like, but no Swiftshot emblem, I'd rather just play something else, even in those situations. But same thing as the Kaisa reroll, you just reroll on level 6 for Yone 3-star, and he will carry you into the late game. Next build up we have is the A tiers, and by the way, if you guys are enjoying this video so far and you want to see more instructional TFT content, I do post pretty regularly, at least once a week, if not twice a week, hoping more once the new set comes out. So subscribe below if you have not already, and hit the like button so that other people can see this video. On to the next build though, we have Lagoon, Soam, and Nilah. So Soam is, I don't know how to feel about him. He is an ability power carry, but he carries more through Morellonomicon than he does through like just raw damage, which makes him a little weird. That's why you really need Nilah to kind of complement him to finish off all the people he slowly damages down. So it is a duo carry comp, which is different from a lot of the other builds that we've been seeing. So it is a blessing and a curse, so to speak, because one, you're not as reliant on a certain character. So if you only have 2 items for your Somm, it's not the end of the world. Whereas if you're playing Yone Reroll, you better have 3 items on your Yone. If not, it's going to be a really bad time. But if you only have like 2 items on your Somm, 2 items on your Nilah, they'll still do pretty fine, right? But if you don't have them both to start, it's going to be a little awkward until you kind of get to that final power spike. So there are pros and cons to both duo carries and solo carries. But overall, like as long as the comp works, as long as good players are playing it, as long as it's looking pretty good in the data, it's going to be pretty solid overall. Let's move on into the next build, which is Zippy carry. So there are 2 ways to play Zippy. One is a tank Zippy, one is an attack damage Zippy. The picture you see here is the attack damage Zippy. If you're doing tank Zippy, you probably want something like a Titan's Resolve and a Sunfire Cape plus another tank item. You don't really want to mix and match the 2. You kind of want to go all in on either full damage such as Bloodthirster IE or like a Sunfire plus like defensive items. But Titan's Resolve does work in both. That's pretty much the only item that does. And I'm not saying it's the end of the world if you have like a hybrid Zippy. It's just better to focus on one style. And then with Zippy, you also want a secondary carry. That's going to be mainly in the form of Xayah. Xayah, yeah, she's not as strong in this patch, but she's still pretty solid. And we do have like, they're kind of like twin comps, so we'll kind of skip over the Xayah section after this. But if you do get Xayah early, you could just focus on her. But if you want to slowly transition into both comps or like flex both of them, you would focus more on Zippy. Oh, also, you don't need 3-star Zippy. You could kind of just chill with 2-star and then use it to kind of go into a super late game board with like 2-star legendaries or whatnot. Onto the next build, though, we have Ezreal Reroll. This one we should have included last week. We didn't, but it's here now. So for all the people, it's finally there. It is in the A tier. It was like kind of emerging, but it depends on how you play it. So a lot of people are actually playing this wrong. So a lot of people play this and they stick with the Ezreal all throughout the whole game. And that's fine to do. I'm not saying it's bad to do, but it's not using the comp to its full potential. So Ezreal is incredibly good at getting top 4s and stuff like that. It's hard to win the game with Ezreal. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's just rarer. It's like, you know, sometimes the underdog wins the World Series. It can happen, but would you be willing to bet money on it if the odds are the same? No, I'd probably bet on the favored team, right, if the odds are the same. But in this case, yeah, it's like Ezreal, he can win games, but it's generally he gets outscaled by other comps. So the best way to play him is actually to hit him 3-star and then kind of go into the super late levels and play for late game right after you do that. And then try to fast 9 with it and then pivot into a stronger comp such as the Dragon comp. So a lot of people, they're actually not playing this comp correctly, especially in like lower elos, obviously. But still pretty solid comp. You just play him, reroll at level 5 and hit Ezreal 3-star, then kind of just spam your F key. So when you're re-rolling, you like press your D key a lot, but when you're like fast leveling, you're just pressing your F key a bunch. So you just have to move your finger like 1 square over to the side whenever you're playing this comp. Next build up we have is the Xayah Ragewing or Guild Xayah build. Again, similar to the Zippy comp, except you're focusing more on Xayah instead of the Zippy. But you could still do both. They both work together, and then you could exchange Zippy for Shyvana later on if you get a lot of AP items. But if you have a lot of AD, you could stick with Zippy and maybe exchange other units, such as maybe Sejuani and Hecarim for your Shyvana, or Sejuani and Jace. You could switch them out for your Shyvana. It depends what items you have, depends what augments you have. But just make sure that when you're playing Xayah, you're running like 6 Ragewing. So if you don't have any bonus Ragewings, you probably don't want to take out Hecarim or Rakan, for example. But going on into how to play the comp, you want to roll at 8, ideally. Level 7's okay if you're low health. Like sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, but ideally aim to roll at level 8 because you're looking for a lot of expensive units in this build. Onto the next build, we have Darkflight Rengar. This is kind of like some people call it like the kitty cat build. There are also a lot of creative things you could do with Darkflight. There's called like I think it's Spark Flight. you go Rel 3 with Ionic Spark and then give your whole team Ionic Sparks. But it remains to be seen how good it actually is. But there are a lot of cool things you could try out with the Darkflight trait. And since we're in the last month, you might as well try something goofy, you know? But for this build, you just want to reroll for Rengar 3. A lot of times people ask me what's better, 2 Rengar 2s or 1 Rengar 3. 1 Rengar 3 is better just because, I mean, he just does more damage than both of them and you could play an extra unit. But that is a question I have received in the past, so hopefully that kind of clears things up. But yeah, reroll for Rengar at level 7, get him 3-star, and then push levels up. Try to get Swain 2 after that, and then just play random synergies that you kind of find. Onto the next build, we have Mage Nomsy. So not too much has changed about this. It's just like the classic, if you see Nomsy and you scout, and you see that Nomsy's in your game in the early game, you could force this if you have a bunch of rods or ability power items. And yeah, there's not really too much to this. You kind of need to stabilize at around level 6 or 7 to get Nomsy 2 and Sylas 2. And then after that, you decide, oh, do I want to stick with this comp? Do I want to reroll for Nomsy 3? Or do I want to just use this to fast 9 with, switch into dragons, and go from there? Next build up we have is a Zyra Pantheon with Whispers. I haven't seen this comp too much, but it's still pretty solid. It's just a little weird, so to speak, but it's still pretty good. It's good because you can stabilize pretty early with a Zyra 2, and then you could keep that unit throughout the entirety of the game with the items on that unit. So not a lot of different comps can say that. I think this is the first 2-cost unit that has items on her in these pictures. I'm not going to scroll all the way up because it's going to take too long, but she might be the only one. So that's the power of this comp. It stabilizes really early, so you just have a lot more gold than your opponents if you actually hit it early. But then after that, you want to focus on your Pantheon, you maybe want to focus on your Soy'Fen, and pretty much just go from there. Next build up, we have Built Different. So Built Different, you just want to focus on Graves carry and just play as many Graves as possible because you could play 2 of the same unit. So Built Different plus Double Trouble is really good, but you really just need the Built Different augment and then kind of just identify who your carry is, because there's no like set carry because it could be anyone because you're essentially playing no composition. B tier, Lee Sin, not that great, but he's still decent. Reroll for him at level 7. Astral Mages, Blux got a small buff, so she was supposed to get buffed 2 patches ago, I believe, or in a B patch some time ago, but it didn't actually go through, so they finally put it in now, so now she has it, so it's like she works again. But it was kind of funny how she didn't. But yeah, it's a solid comp. There are 2 different builds with Lux that you could do. One is the one you see here, which is more focused on ability power, but there's also a Morello build where you go blue buff Morello. That way she casts right as the fight starts, applies Morello to a bunch of people, and it kind of just whittles people down more so in the longer fight. So there are 2 different builds in terms of items you could use for Lux. They're both around the same power, so really just slam items. You're not really aiming for one or the other. Onto the next build, we have Graves Nilah. This is kind of like the flex comp of the set. Not that great. No one actually plays this that much, but I did see someone in the comments recently say he got, I think it was GM only playing this comp. So it definitely does work, but I wouldn't like force it, you know, like the other guy, but I would just kind of flex it between a bunch of different comps and only go for it in certain games. I'm pretty sure that person just really likes this comp and that's why they're forcing it, you know? Darkflight Cannoneer, not too much point in playing this. Might as well just play the Darkflight Rengar comp. I was trying to think of the champion. But yeah, it's pretty much the same comp, but this one's easier to stabilize on because you're going for a 2-cost unit rather than a 3-cost unit, but it's just a lot weaker. Next build up, we have this as C tiers. Just don't play the C tiers. So we'll go into the Tourney Meta. So in the Korean finals, like, a lot of the comps that were being played was really just the dragon comp. So despite, what's it called, high-end shopping and level up being removed, everyone was still playing dragons in the super late game, which kind of makes sense for the set because it is the dragon set. However, the one big change is that the Korean players heavily favored Aurelion Sol as their main carry, whereas everywhere else we've been seeing it's been Aoshin or nothing. So it does give a lot more variety. You could also do other things such as 4 dragons with other stuff, guild Daeja with Zippy, and just other guild units. So Asol, Daeja, and Aoshin, expect those units to be pretty contested later on. So another thing that was interesting, there were not many Graves Seraphine players. And China loves this comp, but Korea seems more into the dragon board. So is there a balance? Are they going to kind of shift back and forth? We see this in a lot of other games where in a final or like a championship, 1 week something is really played, but then the next couple days later, something else emerges to like kind of counter that play style, and then they keep going back and forth because there's like a rocks, paper, scissors things going on, and then it just depends on what your lobby's doing. So there also could just be luck of the draw that dragons happen to be in a lot of the late game team comps in Korea because that's just how those games went and the sample size isn't big. A lot of different factors to kind of consider. One interesting thing we found is that Xayah 3 lost to like an Acel dragon board, which is kind of weird, right? I think they actually buffed Xayah 3 in the recent patch. That's what I remember in my head, but someone remind me down below if it actually did happen. Maybe it was because of this thing that happened where they're like, wow, Xayah 3 shouldn't be losing to like a regular dragon board. Like, that's just so stupid, right? So dragons are just OP. If you can reach them in the late game, definitely do it. And then down here, we have the item start. Sword is just the best because the top 3 of the 4 comps we looked at were all sword comps, and the only one that wasn't was the dragon team. But like, again, you kind of need to get lucky to be able to hit the dragon comp. But yeah, like sword, best item, bow, very similar stuff to the sword, and then tier is good for all the AP and dragon comps. Belt's just solid for defensive. Every comp needs a defensive item. And then after that, I'd say it kind of drops off a bit. Rod is good for like Morello, for Morello comps. It's good for AP, Chain Vest. Rod can also do a Rage Blade later on if you're going for attack damage builds, or if you like just happen to get only attack speed and attack damage items. Chain Vest, just worse than Belt for defensive options, and then yeah, that's going to be pretty much it. I don't like Glove or Negatron, but you're free to do what you want. It is a free country after all, at least in most parts of the world. But most of the people watching me, they are from relatively free countries at least, right? All right, not to get too political, but yeah. Well, let's go back up to the summary. We have the best comps again for patch 12.21. And yeah, sword starts, like the top like 4 comps, they revolve around that. There are a couple rerolls that mainly focus on AP. So if you do like reroll, maybe aim more towards for the AP or tier item starts. But if you're like playing regular, do the sword starts. But really just try to find a way to get to the dragon comp. Like, let's take a look at it again. Like Aurelion Soul or Aeoshin, either or works. Each of them uses different items a bit. Aurelion Soul not as reliant on the mana items as Aeoshin is, but you know, both of them work if you get them 2-star. So if you get them 2-star, like nothing else in the world matters. Like I showed my friend this, I think I told you guys this story before, but for those who haven't heard, like I was coaching my friend. He was trying to get into Masters. He was like Diamond 1, 90 LP or something like that. And I was like, oh, you could play the dragon board this game. He's like, really? I don't have the right augments for it. I was like, the augments don't matter. You just need to hit the dragon board. And he was very healthy around stage 4. So we just go for the dragon comp. His items are mediocre. His augments, one of them wasn't even helping at all. The other 2 were just like generic random augments. And we easily won the game. And I was just like, yeah, it's just the dragon comp. It's just that strong. So it did receive a few nerfs since that game happened, but it just goes to show how super, super, super strong this is. Again, it makes sense. If they're not good in a set that's called Dragonland, something is wrong with the game. We could see this in set 5, where the set mechanic was Garen and Darius, and both those champions sucked, so they removed them in the next set. That is not the case here. They kept the dragons in for the set, and that's why they're so good. But let me know if you guys are excited for set 8, because that is coming around the corner 1 month from now. And I'll be updating the meta snapshot every single Friday, and I'll also be doing a PBE tier list once the new set comes out on PBE. I think that's going to happen. They typically do it 2 weeks before the set actually releases. So I think that's around late November, but don't quote me. Because yeah, but I do hope to see you guys in those future videos. But that's going to be it from me today. I hope to see you all later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And of course, smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.